Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey ahead. This time around, we're talking about the hybrid war that Moscow and Minsk are waging against the European Union. In particular, we will focus on the border between Belarus and Poland, which has been under attack for 3 years now. Warsaw's latest move was to temporarily suspend the right to asylum for refugees crossing over from Belarus. Meanwhile, Brussels is also making moves to better respond to the hybrid warfare being waged by Vladimir Putin and his best friend, Alexander Lukashenko. Want to know more? Well, let's take a look at our report, which will reveal the basics of this story.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has unveiled a 10-point action plan on migration ahead of the EU summit in Brussels, addressing key challenges such as border security and hybrid threats. The plan focuses on accelerating the implementation of the European Migration Pact. Particular attention is to be paid to strengthening borders against Russian and Belarusian efforts to destabilize the EU by weaponizing migration flows. A major priority is enhancing cooperation between EU member states to counter all hybrid threats and crack down on the exploitation of migrants. The next Commissioner for Home Affairs and Migration will lead efforts to introduce stricter regulations for transportation operators involved in illegal migration and work closely with countries of origin to combat human trafficking. Von der Leyen also proposes harmonizing visa policies and creating return hubs outside EU borders to manage the safe return of asylum seekers who do not qualify for protection. Protecting the Schengen area is a critical aspect of the plan, with von der Leyen cautioning that internal border controls should only be reintroduced as a last resort in times of serious security risks. The action plan also addresses the potential return of Syrian refugees and the future of 4.5 million Ukrainians currently residing within the EU. Von der Leyen's proposals aim to balance border security, humanitarian obligations, and the EU's long-term commitment to free movement and regional stability.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. So, let's begin. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk argues that Belarus and Russia are using the right to asylum exactly against the essence of the right to asylum. So what's actually happening here? Tens of thousands of migrants, many of them from the Middle East and Africa, have been lured to cross into Poland via Belarus. Just last month, over 2,500 tried to make the journey, totaling more than 26,000 this year. Belarusian border guards have been actively weaponizing these groups to attempt to break through. Now, of course, Poland is fighting back against this hybrid warfare strategy, with its uniformed services being the first line of defense. Law enforcement officers, border guards and soldiers alike all risk their lives to protect the security of not just Poland itself, but also of the European Union as a whole. Poland's response to the threat has so far been unwavering, but here is where things get a bit tricky. The Council of Europe's Commissioner for Human Rights, Michael O'Flaherty, warned that Poland's policy of returning migrants without assessing their claims, and I quote, does not allow for full respect of international human rights standards and exposes them to the risk of serious violations of the rights protected by the European Convention on Human Rights, end of quote. Meanwhile, Belarus is offering visas to tens of thousands of people, letting them believe these visas will help them along the way. Their strongman leader, Alexander Lukashenko, even told migrants at the border, and I quote once again, "It's up to you, go through, go." It's like a twisted Squid Game, where the prize is a perilous journey through a Belarusian forest. Now, Amnesty International reports that these migrants have been beaten and threatened by Belarusian forces as they attempt to cross into Poland. But not just there. Moscow and Minsk have been utilizing migration to destabilize several EU countries since the second half of 2021. If you can't believe it, well, ask anyone from the Baltics, which have since responded in kind with Warsaw, fortifying their respective borders with Belarus. This issue has, however, been a difficult one for the European Union, which was slow to elicit a united response. The issue of using migrants, many of whom are seeking a better life and opportunities to destabilize Europe, is a concerted effort that's been happening for over 3 years at this point. Here's to the hope. With Ursula von der Leyen's push for a new migration policy, the European Union can withstand the threats of this hybrid warfare strategy. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Anatol Kotau, Forum of Democratic Forces of Belarus. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, nice to meet you.
So the migration debate is very intense recently. Rights groups are criticizing the Polish government, saying that suspending asylum may violate human rights of people trying to get through the border. But it is really interesting to actually take a look at the Belarusian side, namely, what do you and other members of the opposition in Belarus think about these efforts being made at securing the border? Would you agree that they are to some extent necessary also to send a signal to Lukashenko that his attempts to destabilize the region are not going to succeed?
I guess there are two main aspects of this issue, of this problem, and of course, intense or some measures or actions to secure the eastern border of Poland are justified. But we have to look more precisely on the risks we are facing. First of all, it's illegal migration, and it's obvious that guys who are trying to cross the border illegally, coming from the third countries with the assistance provided by Russian and Belarusian regimes, they are not qualifying for asylum in Europe and in Poland in particular. And actually, I haven't heard that there were many cases then these guys applied for asylum procedure in Poland. Of course, Polish authorities have more information about that. So this is illegal migration, which is clear as snow, that it's not the people who are being repressed on the territory of Belarus and they are coming to Poland to seek for asylum. No, it's
because that's a different procedure, isn't it? If you are a member of the opposition, for example, you're persecuted by the Lukashenko regime, you wish to escape the clutches of that regime. So where do you apply for asylum? Because you don't really do that necessarily at the border. There are actually other ways to do that. And I'm assuming that this would not be suspended, right?
Mainly, all the applications are being done on the territory of Poland because the majority of Belarusians or people with other nationalities who are being really repressed in Belarus, they are legally entering Poland and they are starting asylum procedure here. So it's not about those people who are illegal migrants. So as I've said, two different situations. One, which is currently ongoing on Belarusian-Polish border, and it's about illegal migration. And actually, this situation has not much in common with asylum procedure. And the other one, which is ongoing on the territory of Poland mainly, or on border crossing points, or for example at the airport, then people are arriving to Poland, they can ask the officers of bodyguards to start this procedure. So we hope that the second part won't be affected by decision of Polish authorities if it comes into force, to suspend this application for asylum procedure. Because it's quite another situation which is also obvious, then people are still fleeing from Belarus because some people are being released from prisons and some people are still facing repressions in almost 5 years after the protests of 2020. There are still new people who are being repressed by Belarusian authorities. So if we speak about fighting the illegal migrations, then I think any measure taken by or which would be taken authorities are more than justified. And if we speak about asylum for refugees from Belarus or from Ukraine, this should be another case, and here there should be some at least exclusions from this suspension.
So the European Union has also recognized the issue which we're facing, weaponized or instrumentalized migration. And let's just go back to how this phenomenon really looks like, because these people essentially are being not only allowed to reach the border, they're not just encouraged, they're often being tricked into coming into Belarus because they don't live there originally. The regime is actively seeking them out, saying, look, this is a new pathway into the European Union. It's going to be easy peasy. You just need to arrive in Belarus, make yourself comfortable, and then take a short walk through the woods, and voila, you're in the European Union. Of course, it doesn't look that way. But this brings us to the question, what other methods could we use to discourage or to block this process? Because apart from obviously people being tricked and deceived, there is also a huge amount of scope for human trafficking, for people smugglers also taking part in that and perhaps even being facilitated by the regime in Belarus. And finally, the abuse that these people are facing at the border, because they say, oh, we can't go, can't we just go back? Because we can see that, we cannot go through. But the Belarusian border guards, they're saying, no, you have to go through. You have to face, the barbed wire, all the difficulties there. So what methods do you think should be used? What methods are being used to put a stop to all this?
There are several methods which have been utilized by European Union and Poland in particular, with different, let's say, measure, with different effect, with different success, but they actually are almost all of them are on the table. First of all, it's informational campaign in the countries which are really source of illegal migrations. Syria, Yemen, and other countries which are being reached by Belarusian and Russian regimes to seek for these illegal migrants to sell this pathway to European perspective. And
if I may, because this is important, right? These are countries facing conflicts, people really wanting to get out. But let's assume that these campaigns are successful. What if the Putin regime, by extension Lukashenko regime, are simply going to turn to the countries that they actually have some partial control over, like, for example, Mali, where they have a friendly regime that they are propping up and say, look, we actually need a few people to come to our country. If they want to get to the European Union, you are free to send them in. And in that case, no information campaign is going to work because these regimes are affiliated to some extent with Russia. So what happens then?
Yeah, then there is one more remedy, and it has been also utilized by European Union. It's sanctions for the transportation companies which are involved in human trafficking. Mainly, it's about air companies, which were actually the main source of trafficking people from distant countries to Russia or to Belarus. And this also worked perfectly well with Iranian companies which were facing the ban or sanctions to fly to Europe to receive some financial or other type of support, and this worked perfectly well. But this remedy has also its own limitations. For example, now these sanctions over Iranian air fleet have been imposed, so they, from my point of view, they cannot be afraid anymore of imposing sanctions because they are under sanctions right now. And then we are coming for, I would say, some sort of last resort, last remedy, which have been utilized by Poland twice, and it worked perfectly well. In 2021, then it was the peak of migration crisis. Poland warned Belarus and China that it could close the borders, and it solved or it normalized the situation to some extent. This summer, also, there was a closure of one of the border cross the Bolshevik for just 33 hours, and it also resulted in introducing some limit by Belarusian side for these attempts to cross the border illegally. So if there is an increase of illegal migrants, or I would say if there is a change in their behavior, attitude, if they are becoming more aggressive, for example, if they are getting back to injuring Polish bodyguards or Polish soldiers at the border, there is a last resort to close the border crossing points for the goods.
And this perhaps is the perfect way to conclude this. If it is not possible to appeal to the morality of dictators, which in most cases it is not, appealing to their wallet is actually likely to produce much better results. Food for thought for European leaders, essentially. Anatol Kota was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight. And now we're moving on to Eastern News Flash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. North Korea's involvement in the Russian war in Ukraine has escalated beyond supplying weapons, sending personnel directly to the front lines. Various media outlets report that North Korea has sent around 10,000 soldiers to Russia to support its war of aggression against Ukraine, signaling a deepening of military ties between the two nations.
It's unclear in what roles these soldiers were deployed. In another sign of developing military cooperation, a special battalion composed entirely of North Koreans has reportedly been formed within the Russian army. Reports also suggest that a recent Ukrainian missile strike may have killed several North Korean officers. Amid these developments, Ukrainian military intelligence reported that 18 North Korean soldiers had deserted near the Russia-Ukraine border, prompting a wide-scale search operation. North Korea has been supplying Russia with artillery shells and ballistic missiles since the fall of 2023.
Uzbekistan is in talks to expand an existing migration agreement it has with Germany, which allows Tashkent to accept rejected Afghan asylum seekers in exchange for increased quotas for skilled Uzbek guest workers. According to the Netherlands' asylum and migration minister, the country's officials have now initiated early discussions with Uzbekistan to establish a similar deal.
Migrants who have exhausted all legal avenues often face rejection from their home countries, making their deportation a significant challenge for European nations. For years, these countries have sought solutions to return these individuals, especially Afghans, who are particularly difficult to repatriate due to the lack of formal diplomatic relations with Afghanistan since the Taliban took control. The current arrangement was a key topic during German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's visit to Uzbekistan in September. These deals align with Uzbekistan President Shavkat Mirziyoyev's broader economic strategy to transform Uzbekistan from a raw materials exporter to a manufacturer of finished goods. As a consequence, the local government is also focused on expanding opportunities for skilled Uzbek workers in EU countries as part of this economic shift.
According to Iranian state media, local authorities have summoned Hungary's ambassador to protest newly imposed EU sanctions and deny Western allegations of ballistic missile transfers to Russia. The European Union has imposed sanctions on 7 individuals and organizations, including Iran Air, over the alleged supply of long-range weapons to the regime of Vladimir Putin.
Hungary was singled out as it currently holds the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. During the meeting, Iran condemned the sanctions, calling them illegal and ineffective. What is more, the Iranian Foreign Ministry dismissed accusations of involvement in the Ukraine conflict, calling them baseless. Because of the sanctions, Iran Air announced that it was suspending flights to Europe because it could no longer secure the necessary flight permits. Other Iranian airlines are also affected by the sanctions, which target aviation figures but also key military entities, including those within the Islamic Revolutionary Guards. The sanctions include asset freezes and travel bans within the EU.
Moldova has signed a memorandum of understanding with 8 Nordic Baltic countries to counter Russian hybrid attacks. The agreement, signed in Chisinau on the 15th of October, comes just days before pivotal elections in the country and a referendum on Moldova's future direction towards Western integration.
The agreement was reached with Denmark, Finland, Estonia, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway and Sweden. It aims to strengthen Moldova's defenses against Russian disinformation efforts. Pro-Western President Maia Sandu, who will seek a second term on October 20th, has moved Moldova away from Moscow's influence since her 2020 victory. International observers will monitor the upcoming vote. Moldova, despite the continued presence of Russian troops in its Transnistria region, has sided with Ukraine after Russia's invasion and welcomed Ukrainian refugees. Consequently, support for Moldova's European aspirations has grown, with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen recently offering the country a €1.8 billion aid package.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.